everyone. My name is Joe Mckinney. I'm the CEO of the Startup Societies Foundation. The Startup Societies Foundation is an organization that's existed for about 2.5 years. We are a think tank that studies small experimental governments. The most abundant and common version of this is a special economic zone, which is an area within a host nation that has different policies than the rest of the host nation. We've had a lot of success recently. In fact, I competed last year, and since then we have had an enormous amount of success that allowed us to expand into a lot of different areas. In fact, this specific proposal will be part of our new research arm, the Institute for Competitive Governance. So first, just talking on a basic philosophy of our organization, we see ourselves more as a do tank versus a think tank. Now, that's not to say that we're not about education, traditional politics, and being a think tank and doing academic work. We're explicitly about that, and it's a large part of our work. However, we think that there's been definitely a focus within the liberty movement that's been more about arguing and perhaps even virtue signaling over actually accomplishing results. They've been focused on, defending their idea on the Hill rather than looking at the existing tools that already propel free markets and free minds. So that's precisely what we're all about. So as we were saying before, the Institute for Competitive Governance is a new research arm within the Startup Societies Foundation. Right now, it is run by our academic director, Tom W. Bell of Chapman University. He's also the author of Your Next Government, From Nation States to Stateless Nations. He's also a heavy practitioner in the Startup Society field, in fact, working in projects like Liberland, the Seasteading Institute in French Polynesia, and various special economic zones around the world. We currently have a board of advisors that includes Patrick Friedman, grandson of Milton Friedman and son of David Friedman. Alex Tabarrok, the creator of and popularizer of the work about dominant assurance contracts, which are vital in the realm of private law, and also Lodo Moberg, one of the foremost experts of special economic zones in the world. And also, they're joining our Startup Societies Foundation founders, which includes Paraka Khanna, the author of Connectography, and Balaji Srinivasan, the board member of Andreessen Horowitz, one of the biggest, actually the biggest venture capital firm in the Silicon Valley. So we've got five white papers coming up. New Hanseatic League by Mark Fraser, Special Information Zones by Sam Milopoulos, Free Trade Zones by Lodo Moberg, Special International Zones by Tom W. Bell, and Refugee Cities by Michael Castle-Miller. We're also working with Patrick Friedman to create an open source journal for Startup Society or competitive governance projects. So that's very much an academic realm of that. So we are very much about education. But one of the things Tom has been working on for a while, and especially outlined in Your Next Government, is the merger of the academic with the practical. And so he's been studying different forms of private and international law, so real established precedent of law. And he realized that there can be an open source legal system that is based on existing practices. So it's called ULEX, and that's based off of the word Unix, which is the world's first open source operating system. And essentially, they're trying to create an operating system of laws. Yeah. Is there anything particular you want me to cover? Okay. All right. So the innovation of ULEX is that it's not an innovation. It's already based on established practices. This isn't some crazy scheme from blockchain hippies. This is an established legal precedent that's practiced all around the world from private companies that that are operating in different jurisdictions. And so this is the basic mechanisms that he was able to distill into the kernel of what he calls ULEX. So the very first, there's the procedural rules and there's also the substantive rules. But first we'll go over the procedural rules. The procedural rules are just how you come to a rule. And in private international law, they usually have a system in which each party, the plaintiff and the defendant, they choose a judge, and that judge, those judges collectively choose a third. So there's never any one judge chooses the other and they don't come to a decision. Also, a common practice is with remedies. They ask the plaintiff and the defendant to come up with a remedy that they think would be appropriate. This is better than, let's say, the United States system, where the plaintiff, in order to try to get as much as possible, tries to get $1 million, knowing that the judge will just cut it in half if he rules in his favor, so at least he'll get $500,000. So it actually incentivizes both parties to come to an agreement. And then very common practice is that the losing party pays the winning party's legal fees. So these are the very basic rules that can be used to judge a decision. But unfortunately, you can't just make a ruling based off of that. There has to be some body of law to base it off of. So this is what the substantive rules are, which is the body of law that the procedural rules use to determine a ruling. And what Tom decides is that because of the competitiveness of common law and how established it is throughout multiple jurisdictions, he decides to take precedent from the restatements of common law in the Uniform Business Organization Code, which is basically the synthesization of common law into basic principles. So basically, these procedural rules used to determine rulings by the substantive rules. It's basically it's civil law based on common law. And what we're providing is, because it is an open source software, we can't just be one single creator of it. We're creating through the ICG website, the Institute for Competitive Governance website, a forum and a place where they can actually develop this code. There'll be a repository of documents like technical white papers about how you would develop this, a forum in which you would discuss these ideas, a GitHub for coding, collaboration, and tracking progress, and also a bounty system that can reward coders in cryptocurrencies or PayPal or whatever for finishing certain parts of the code. And that's essentially it. We're asking for about $15,000, $6,000 of it going to the website creation, $4,000 going to white paper production to get academics to write about ULEX, to justify it to the legal community, and the rest will go to Tom W. Bell as a salary so he can spearhead this and become, write more documentation for it, create alliances, as well as be the leader in telling these coders, okay, this is what my original vision is, and this is how we move forward. And I think that's basically the sum of it, so I think I should probably open up for questions.
I know exactly how to word this question.
Okay.
There we go. So pick a zone that you would want its attributes to be part of your open source community. What do you think in the hierarchy of kind of qualities of these zones that are successful? What's like the most important thing you'd want every other group to replicate?
Zones, do you mean in terms of what their policy environment is, or are you talking about other aspects? Because of some really important things about...
I'm letting you decide.
Okay, gotcha. Well, zones, when you look at them, they tend to do places and areas that are they're fairly close to markets. They can't be out in the middle of nowhere. They also have to be in areas that are actually badly governed already, because they wouldn't have the competitive reason to go to the zone. That's why Chinese special economic zones were the most competitive of all. Because after Mao Zedong died, Deng Xiaoping, his successor, he realized we can't change the system right now. We can't move from communism to capitalism. So he designated 4 cities. One of them was Shenzhen, to adopt more innovative policies that are more free market. And in 30 years, Shenzhen, which was a fishing village of 30,000 people, became a city of 18 million with a gross domestic product equivalent to Ireland, Portugal, or Vietnam. So it was an absolutely desolate place where people were starving to death. And you find in areas that are pretty desolate, they do more successful versus, there's been zones in the United States, for instance, or even some in Europe before they were criminalized by the EU. But unfortunately, the competitive difference between the governance wasn't significant enough.
So focus in on my question. What's the number one attribute that you would take away from that example that you would think you'd want to spread to other zones?
From the example I gave, I would want ULEX to be practiced in zones where where development is most necessary. Yeah.
Thank you.
Am I right assuming that your product is something like Wikipedia about government?
Sorry, I'm actually partially deaf. Can you repeat that?
Wikipedia about government. Governmentopedia or something of the sort.
Government will pay us?
Wikipedia.
It can be considered like Wikipedia. It's a little bit more interactive than that. But yes, it can be considered the Wikipedia of law.
Then how do you ensure the quality of the content that's being uploaded?
So that is the question. It's sort of like any marketplace. You tend to have the best product be chosen, and there's usually some sort of standard. The way that ULEX will be used at first, more often than not, it won't be established by startup societies or even governments at first. It'll mostly be for private adjudication. And they will be using it for a while, and they already have established best practices for private adjudication. And in fact, they'll probably embed some of their best practices in their fork of ULEX, because like Bitcoin, ULEX can take many different tangents. Some of them may not want to use the restatements. They might want to use a civil law, or maybe they want to use Texas law. It depends. and that's why you have the open source community, because if you have a certain demand for a different type of law, or if you want to add a procedural rule, a different fork can take care of it.
So,
I'll be short. I'll be short. What would your 10-second pitch on this be on topic? Why is this a good thing for the freedom fight?
States are the biggest enemies to liberty that currently exist, and they are currently the biggest purveyors and controllers of law. We need to create an alternative so that we can protect liberty while still maintaining rule of law.
Thank you.
All right?